The champagne glass slipped from my fingers when I heard those words. My daughter-in-law Sandra stood up at my grandson's wedding reception, her manicured finger pointing directly at me like a dagger. "She's not real family," she announced to 200 guests, her voice cutting through the soft music and gentle conversations. The words echoed in the ballroom, bouncing off the crystal chandeliers I'd helped pay for. Everyone stared at me, their faces a mixture of shock and confusion. I stayed frozen in my seat, my hands trembling in my lap, feeling like the world had just tilted off its axis. Then my grandson, Michael, walked over, his face unreadable, and leaned down to whisper something in my ear that changed everything. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. But let me back up and tell you who I am, because you need to understand why those words cut so deep. My name is Margaret Thompson, and I'm 72 years old. People always tell me I look younger, probably because I've spent my life smiling through everything, even when my heart was breaking. My silver hair is always neatly pinned back, a habit from my nursing days when presentation meant professionalism. These hands, you see, now spotted with age and slightly arthritic, have held 3 generations of this family together through every storm. When my Harold died 8 years ago from a sudden heart attack, I thought my world had ended. We'd been married for 41 years, built our life piece by piece, raised our son David with all the love we could give. But life has a way of needing you when you think you have nothing left to give. That's when Michael really came into my life. Oh, he'd always been my grandson, but after Harold passed, he became so much more. David and his wife Jennifer were going through a rough patch financially. David had lost his job at the manufacturing plant, and Jennifer's part-time work barely covered their rent. Michael was 15 then, all gangly limbs and broken voice, trying to act tough while his world crumbled. I'll never forget the night David knocked on my door, tears in his eyes. "Mom, I hate to ask, but could Michael stay with you for a while? Just until we get back on our feet?" A while turned into 3 years. 3 years of helping with homework at my kitchen table, teaching him to drive in Harold's old Buick, attending every basketball game even when my arthritis screamed. I used my retirement savings to pay for his SAT prep courses, his college application fees, and eventually his first year of university. Not because I had to, but because that's what love looks like. It shows up. It sacrifices without keeping score. Michael would sit with me on Sunday mornings, eating the blueberry pancakes I'd made for his father decades ago, and tell me about his dreams. "Grandma, you're the rock of this family," he'd say, syrup dripping on his chin. "When I get married, someday I want my wife to be just like you, kind, strong, selfless." Those words feel like poison now sitting in my chest as I remember how excited I was when he first brought Sandra home 2 years ago. She seemed perfect then, charming, accomplished, beautiful. The way she laughed at Michael's jokes, held his hand, looked at him with what I thought was genuine love. I welcomed her with open arms, the daughter I never had, already imagining the grandchildren she'd give me, the family dinners we'd share. If only I'd known what was really behind that perfect smile. Those months leading up to the wedding were some of the happiest I'd had since Harold passed. My days had found a gentle rhythm again, like a familiar song playing softly in the background of life. Every morning I'd wake at 6:30 without an alarm clock, my body trained by decades of routine. The first thing I'd do was make Harold's coffee, 1 cup for me now instead of 2, but still using his favorite dark roast from the local market. I'd sit on our back porch, the one he built with his own hands 30 years ago, watching the cardinals visit the feeder Michael had installed for me last Christmas. The garden had become my sanctuary. Those rose bushes Harold planted for our anniversary were thriving, their pink blooms reminding me that beautiful things can still grow even after loss. I'd spend hours tending to them, my hands in the soil, talking to them like old friends. Sometimes I'd catch myself telling them about the wedding plans, about how Sandra wanted roses in her bouquet. "You'd be perfect for it," I'd whisper to the strongest blooms, already imagining how beautiful they'd look in her hands. Tuesday evenings were for wedding planning calls with Michael and Sandra. I'd set up my laptop at the kitchen table, the same spot where Michael used to do his homework and wait for their faces to appear on the screen. Sandra would show me centerpiece ideas, venue decorations, color schemes. "What do you think, Mom?" She'd taken to calling me that recently, and each time, my heart would swell. The burgundy or the wine? I'd study the swatches seriously, feeling included, needed, valued. I threw myself into creating something special for their day. Every evening after dinner, I'd sit in Harold's old recliner with my sewing basket, hand-stitching delicate lace onto handkerchiefs for Sandra and her bridesmaids. Each tiny stitch was a prayer for their happiness, a hope for their future. The handkerchiefs would be their something old, incorporating lace from my own wedding dress, connecting generations through thin threads and careful hands. The financial contribution didn't feel like sacrifice. It felt like purpose. I'd gone to the bank, transferred nearly all of Harold's life insurance money, $50,000 we'd saved for our golden years, to help pay for the venue Sandra had fallen in love with. "It's too much, Grandma," Michael had protested, but I'd waved him off. What else would I spend it on? This is what family does? This is what love looks like. Weekends brought lunches with Sandra. She'd pick me up in her sleek silver car, always complimenting something about me. "That brooch is stunning, Mom. Is it vintage?" We'd go to the small cafe downtown where everyone knew my name, and she'd listen to my stories about raising David, about Harold's terrible dancing at our wedding, about the time Michael tried to bake me a birthday cake at age 7 and nearly burned down my kitchen. She'd laugh, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand, making me feel like the most interesting person in the world. I'd started a journal, something I hadn't done in years, documenting this beautiful season. "Sandra came by today with fabric samples," one entry read. "She values my opinion so much. It feels wonderful to be planning another wedding, to be part of new beginnings, instead of always looking back at endings." Another entry. "Michael said, I'm the glue holding everyone together. If Harold could see how our grandson turned out, how happy he is with Sandra, he'd be so proud." The house felt alive again. There were wedding magazines on every surface, sticky notes with vendor phone numbers on my refrigerator, boxes of decorations in the spare room. For the first time in 8 years, I had something to look forward to besides memories. I was living in a beautiful dream. I just didn't know I was about to wake up. It started 3 weeks before the wedding, on a Thursday afternoon that should have been like any other. I'd been expecting Sandra for our usual planning session at 2 p.m. I'd even baked her favorite lemon squares, the ones she always raved about, arranging them perfectly on my best china plate. The coffee was fresh. My notebook was open with questions about the seating arrangements, and I'd put on the pearl necklace she'd once admired. The 2 p.m. came and went, then 2:30. By 3 p.m. I called Michael. "Oh, Grandma, didn't Sandra tell you? She moved the meeting to her mother's house. Something about it being more convenient for the caterer." His voice sounded strange, distant, like he was reading from a script. When I asked if I should drive over to join them, there was a pause. Too long of a pause. No, don't trouble yourself. We've got it handled today." That night, I couldn't shake the feeling settling in my stomach like a stone. I tried to reason with myself as I lay in bed, staring at Harold's picture on the nightstand. Wedding planning was stressful. Maybe Sandra simply forgot to tell me about the change. But she'd never forgotten before. She was meticulous about everything, keeping color-coded spreadsheets and sending reminder texts about every little detail. The next incident happened at the bridal shower the following Saturday. Sandra's mother, Patricia, had organized it at the country club. I arrived with my gift, an antique silver tea set that had belonged to Harold's mother, carefully polished until it gleamed. I'd imagined Sandra using it in her new home, maybe passing it down to her own daughters someday. But when I walked into the elegant room filled with pink balloons and white orchids, conversations seemed to stop. Not all at once, but in waves, like dominoes falling. Sandra's cousin whispered something to her sister, both glancing at me before looking away. Patricia greeted me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her Margaret. How lovely you could make it. Feeling like an afterthought rather than genuine welcome. They'd seated me at a table in the back corner with Michael's father's elderly aunt, who barely spoke English, and two teenagers more interested in their phones than conversation. During the gift opening, when Sandra held up my tea set, her thank you felt rehearsed. Oh, how vintage. How sweet of you to think of us. Not, I'll treasure this forever, like she'd said about the blender from her college roommate. She set it aside quickly, moving on to the next present with notably more enthusiasm. Patricia and her sister exchanged a look I couldn't quite read but felt in my bones. The moment that really made my skin prickle came when I offered Sandra my mother's pearl necklace for her something borrowed. We were alone for a moment by the gift table, and I'd pulled out the velvet box I'd been carrying in my purse. Sandra, dear, these would look beautiful with your dress. My mother wore them at her wedding. I wore them at mine. And that's so kind. She cut me off, not even opening the box. But my mother already has that covered. Family tradition, you understand. The way she said family tradition felt pointed, like a door being quietly closed in my face. Then she added with a smile that seemed almost pitying, "We're keeping things modern anyway. Your generation style is lovely, but it's not really the look we're going for." As I drove home that day, my hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary, I kept replaying every interaction, the whispers, the looks, the careful distance. Something had shifted in the air around me like the barometric pressure dropping before a storm. But I couldn't name it, couldn't point to any single thing wrong enough to justify this growing unease. I just knew that somehow I'd gone from being mom to being something else entirely. That night after the bridal shower, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea, doing what I'd done my whole life, making excuses for other people's behavior. The steam from the tea rose like the thoughts swirling in my mind, each one trying to explain away what I'd experienced. Sandra was getting married in 2 weeks. Of course she was stressed. Every bride became a little short-tempered before their big day. I remembered my own wedding, how I'd snapped at my poor mother about the shade of lipstick she'd chosen, then cried about it later. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through pictures from the past year. There was Sandra and me at the cake tasting, both of us laughing as frosting dotted her nose. Another at the dress fitting where she'd grabbed my hand and squeezed it when she saw herself in the mirror. "You'll be my real mom now," she'd whispered that day. These moments were real. They had to be. People don't just pretend that kind of warmth. The next morning I woke determined to push away the dark clouds gathering in my mind. I went to the department store and bought a new dress for the rehearsal dinner, a sophisticated navy blue number that the saleswoman assured me was perfect for the mother of the groom. Well, grandmother, but who was counting? I even splurged on new shoes, silver heels that Harold would have whistled at. "You're being paranoid, Maggie," I told my reflection, using Harold's nickname for me. "This is Michael's special time. Don't ruin it with your imagination." I decided Sandra needed space. That's all. Her mother, Patricia, was probably feeling territorial about the wedding planning. It was natural. She was the actual mother of the bride. I was just the grandmother of the groom. The hierarchy was clear, even if it stung a little. Patricia had probably suggested moving the planning sessions, wanting to be more involved with her daughter's big day. Who could blame her? If I had a daughter, I'd want to be at the center of her wedding, too. When Michael called midweek to check on me, I kept my voice bright and cheerful. "How's Sandra doing, sweetheart? Not too stressed, I hope." "She's fine, Grandma, just busy with last-minute stuff." He sounded tired, distracted. "Should I come help? I could handle the place cards or help with welcome bags." No, no, you've done enough. Just show up looking beautiful, okay? Done enough. The phrase stuck in my throat, but I swallowed it down with practiced ease. He meant I'd been so generous already. That's all. He was trying to spare me more work. My Michael, always so considerate, just like I'd raised him to be. I threw myself into perfecting my speech for the reception. 5 pages of handwritten memories, carefully chosen stories that showed Michael's character, welcomed Sandra to our family, and honored Harold's memory. I practiced it in front of the mirror, making sure my voice wouldn't crack when I mentioned how Harold would have loved Sandra, how proud he would have been to see Michael become a husband. Thursday before the wedding, I ran into Sandra at the grocery store. She was in the produce section, examining strawberries with the same intensity she brought to wedding planning. "Sandra, dear," I called out, genuinely happy to see her. She looked up, and for just a second, I saw something flash across her face. Annoyance? Dismay? Before it smoothed into a smile. "Margaret, shopping for the big day?" "Just regular groceries," I said, trying to keep things light. "Though I did pick up the ingredients for Michael's favorite cookies. Thought I'd make a batch for you two to have after the honeymoon." "That's sweet," she said, already, turning back to the strawberries. "We're actually going gluten-free, but it's the thought that counts." Since when was Michael gluten-free? The boy who lived on my homemade bread for 3 years. But I just smiled. Stress. It was just wedding stress. Everything would be perfect once they said, "I do." Friday afternoon, 2 days before the wedding, I decided to surprise Michael and Sandra with one last gift. I'd found Harold's cufflinks in the back of my jewelry box, platinum with tiny diamonds, a wedding gift from his father. They deserved to be worn again, to be part of another beginning. I drove to Michael's apartment without calling ahead, knowing they'd both be home preparing for the rehearsal dinner that evening. The apartment building's main door was propped open with a delivery box, so I walked right in, climbing the 2 flights to their unit. As I approached their door, I heard Sandra's voice through the thin walls, sharp and clear. She was on the phone, pacing by the sound of her heels clicking on the hardwood floors. I raised my hand to knock but froze when I heard my name. "Once we're married, we'll have access to everything," Sandra was saying, her voice different from any tone I'd ever heard her use. Gone was the sweet, respectful woman who called me Mom. This voice was calculating, cold. "The old woman doesn't even know about the trust fund clause." My hand dropped to my side. "Trust fund? What trust fund?" My heart began hammering against my ribs, so hard I was sure she'd hear it through the door. "No, listen to me," Sandra continued, impatience creeping into her tone. "Harold Thompson set it up before he died. It's worth $2 million. Yes, million. It transfers to Michael after marriage, but only if Margaret is deemed unfit or not considered immediate family. Michael's too soft to see what needs to be done, but I'm working on him." I pressed my back against the hallway wall, my legs suddenly feeling like water. $2 million. Harold had life insurance, yes, but a trust fund. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. We'd lived modestly our whole lives, saved carefully, but $2 million? "Mom, I told you I've been documenting everything," Sandra went on. "Every time she forgets someone's name, every time she repeats a story. Last week, she told the same story about Michael's first day of school twice in one lunch. Classic dementia signs. We just need a few more examples after the wedding, then we can petition the court." My hand flew to my mouth to stifle a gasp. The room seemed to spin. Those lunches where she'd listened so attentively to my stories. She'd been gathering evidence. Every moment of forgetfulness, every senior moment she'd been collecting like ammunition. The beauty is, she trusts me completely. She actually gave us $50,000 for this wedding. Can you believe it? Spending her own money on the event that'll destroy her. Sandra laughed, and the sound was like glass breaking in my chest. "No, Michael doesn't know the full plan yet. He just thinks we're protecting his inheritance from her age-related decline. He's starting to believe she's losing it. Yesterday I convinced him she'd forgotten about the rehearsal dinner location. when really, I just never told her it changed. I heard footsteps approaching the door and panic seized me. I couldn't let her know I'd heard. On shaking legs, I hurried back down the hallway, taking the stairs as quickly as my trembling knees would allow. I made it to my car just as my stomach revolted. I barely got the door open before I vomited onto the parking garage floor, my body rejecting the poison I just swallowed through my ears. Sitting in my car, gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles, I stared at the cufflinks in their velvet box. Harold's cufflinks, Harold's trust fund, Harold's money that was going to be stolen by a woman I'd welcomed as a daughter. The woman my grandson was about to marry in 48 hours. The worst part? She was right about one thing. Michael was too soft, too trusting, just like I'd been. But how could I tell him? How could I destroy his happiness 2 days before his wedding with no proof except an overheard conversation? My phone buzzed with a text from Sandra. "Can't wait to see you tonight at the rehearsal, Mom. You're going to love the surprise we have planned." I stared at the word mom and felt something inside me break. I drove home in a daze, my mind struggling to process what I'd heard. The moment I walked through my door, I went straight to Harold's study, a room I'd barely entered since his death. His filing cabinets were exactly as he'd left them, organized with military precision from his years as an accountant. With shaking hands, I began pulling out folders: insurance policies, bank statements, investment accounts. Nothing about a trust fund. Then, in the back of the bottom drawer, I found it. A manila envelope marked Thompson Family Trust in Harold's careful handwriting. Inside were documents I'd never seen, papers he'd apparently signed just months before his heart attack. As I read through the legal language, my blood ran cold. The trust was real. $2.1 million from investments Harold had inherited from his uncle and grown over 40 years. He'd never told me. The sticky note attached in his handwriting said, "For Michael's future. Discuss with Maggie after probate." But he'd died before probate finished, and in my grief, I'd let David handle most of the financial matters. David, who'd been struggling financially and probably never even knew this existed. The trust terms were specific. Upon Michael's marriage, the funds would transfer to him, but only if the current trustee was deemed unfit for fiduciary duty or was no longer considered immediate family by legal definition. And there, on the trustee line, was my name. Harold had appointed me, not David, to protect Michael's inheritance. My laptop was still open on the kitchen table from the morning. With trembling fingers, I searched for legal definition immediate family marriage. The results made my stomach turn. In our state, once Michael married, Sandra would legally become immediate family, while a grandmother could be contested as extended family if someone petitioned the court, especially if that grandmother showed signs of mental decline. I thought back to all those moments with Sandra, the times she'd asked me to repeat stories, claiming she loved hearing them, the way she'd started asking me about dates and names, pretending to be interested in family history. "Now, what year did Harold's father pass away again?" she'd ask sweetly, then look concerned when I had to think about it. 1987. "No, 1989, I'd said once, second-guessing myself. I'd seen her type something into her phone. The rehearsal dinner was in 3 hours. I sat at my kitchen table, still in my coat, staring at the trust documents. Everything made horrible sense now. Sandra's sudden interest in me after she and Michael got engaged, the rush to get married. They'd only been dating 18 months. The expensive venue that required my life savings, depleting my accounts so I'd look financially irresponsible. My phone rang. "Michael. Grandma, are you coming to the rehearsal? Sandra's worried about you." I bet she was. "Yes, sweetheart, I'll be there." "Good. Hey, Grandma." He paused, and I heard muffled voices in the background. "Sandra mentioned you've seemed a bit confused lately. Mixing up dates and stuff. Are you feeling okay?" The knife twisted deeper. My precious grandson, the boy I'd raised, was being turned against me. "I'm fine, Michael, just wedding excitement." "Okay, but Sandra's mom knows a great doctor who specializes in senior health. Maybe after the wedding, you could just get checked out? For all our peace of mind? Senior health, code for geriatric psychiatry. They already had a doctor lined up. How long had they been planning this? We'll talk about it later, I managed, my voice surprisingly steady. After I hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness of my kitchen. The woman my grandson was about to marry had orchestrated an elaborate con. She'd pretended to love me, called me mom, accepted my money and my trust, all while documenting my every stumble to steal Harold's legacy. And she'd turned Michael into her accomplice, probably without him even realizing the full extent of her plan. The rehearsal dinner was in 3 hours. The wedding was tomorrow, and I had just discovered I was not attending a celebration, I was walking into an execution. I couldn't go to that rehearsal dinner without knowing more. With 2 hours before I needed to leave, I did something I'd never done before. I became a detective in my own life. I searched Sandra's full name online, something that had never occurred to me before. Why would it? She was going to be family. But now, with shaking fingers, I typed Sandra Patricia Brennan into Google. The first few results were normal, her LinkedIn, a college graduation photo. But on the second page, I found a legal document from Arizona. My heart stopped. Sandra had been involved in a lawsuit 3 years ago. The details were sparse, but the phrase, breach of fiduciary duty, and elderly plaintiff made my blood run cold. The case had been settled out of court. I kept digging. Patricia Brennan, her mother, the woman who'd been so territorial about wedding planning. She'd been a paralegal at a firm specializing in estate law before retiring 2 years ago, right around the time Sandra met Michael. Her father, Robert Brennan, was a financial advisor who'd lost his license in Nevada for irregularities in elderly client accounts. These weren't just greedy people. They were professionals. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Margaret, we've saved you a special seat at the rehearsal dinner, right next to Dr. Jennifer Whitman. She's fascinating, specializes in geriatric wellness. I thought you two would have so much to talk about. Dr. Whitman, the senior health specialist Michael had mentioned. They were positioning their pieces on the board, and I was already in check. I called my friend Agnes, who volunteered at the courthouse and knew everyone in town. Agnes, I need a favor. Can you check if any legal documents have been filed recently with my name or Michael's? 20 minutes later, she called back, her voice worried. Margaret, this is strange. There's a competency evaluation request that's been pre-filed but not submitted. It's dated for Monday, 2 days after the wedding. Sandra and her parents are listed as concerned family members. How can they be family if the wedding hasn't happened yet? Because once the wedding happened, they would be, and they'd already prepared the documents, ready to file the moment the rings were exchanged. But there was more. Agnes had a cousin who worked at Michael's bank. Through careful questioning, I learned that Michael had added Sandra to his accounts last month, and she'd already been making large transfers to an account I didn't recognize. When I checked my own accounts online, I noticed something chilling. Someone had been accessing my account information, not taking money, just looking. The login locations showed Patricia's address. They'd been monitoring my finances, waiting for the right moment. I found Michael's work schedule from 2 months ago. He always sent it to me so I'd know when he was free for dinner. Cross-referencing it with my calendar, I realized something horrifying. Every time Michael had been working late or traveling for business, Sandra had suggested we have our special lunches. Those were the times she'd been most interested in my stories, most eager to hear about family history. She'd been gathering intelligence when Michael wasn't around to notice her tactics. The final piece fell into place when I remembered a conversation from last month. Robert Brennan had casually mentioned his investment connections, who could help manage the trust once everything was sorted out. He'd already lined up buyers for Harold's investment properties that were part of the trust, properties I didn't even know existed until today. This wasn't just about declaring me incompetent. They planned to liquidate everything immediately, probably claiming it was for Margaret's care, while pocketing the money. They'd done this before, in other states, to other families. Michael wasn't their first mark. He was just their biggest score, And my grandson, my sweet, trusting Michael, had no idea he was about to marry into a family of professional con artists. I didn't go to the rehearsal dinner. I couldn't. Instead, I sent a text claiming sudden nausea, not entirely a lie, and locked myself in my house. The weight of everything crashed down on me like a physical force, driving me to my knees on the living room floor. The sobs came in waves, each one pulled from somewhere so deep it felt like my soul was tearing apart. I crawled to the couch, Harold's couch where he'd held me through every crisis, and clutched his photograph to my chest. "You left me alone to face this," I whispered to his frozen smile. "You made that trust and never told me. Did you know I'd be strong enough? Because I'm not, Harold. I'm not." The photo album sat on the coffee table, and against my better judgment, I opened it. There was Michael at age 5, missing his front teeth, holding up the first dollar the tooth fairy, me, had left him. I remembered driving to his house at midnight because David had forgotten to put money under his pillow. There was Michael at 15, the day he moved in with me, trying to look brave while his whole world fell apart. I'd held him that night while he cried for hours, promising him everything would be okay. Page after page of memories assaulted me. Michael's high school graduation, where he'd pulled me on stage with him, announcing to everyone that his grandmother was the reason he'd made it. His college acceptance letter. We'd opened it together, both crying when he got into his dream school, the engineering degree I'd paid for by selling Harold's vintage car collection, telling Michael his grandfather would have wanted it that way. Every sacrifice had been made with love, without expectation of repayment. The vacations I didn't take so he could have tutoring. The new car I didn't buy so he could have a reliable one for college. The retirement home I'd chosen to avoid, working past 70 as a part-time bookkeeper to help with his student. Expenses. My arthritis medicine I'd sometimes skip to save money, telling myself the pain wasn't that bad. And for what? So some calculating woman could swoop in and poison him against me? So she could turn my love into evidence of senility? I found myself in Michael's old room, untouched since he'd moved out. His basketball trophies still lined the shelf. The quilt I'd made him still covered the bed. On his desk was a framed photo from last Christmas. Him, Sandra, and me, all wearing matching sweaters she'd insisted on. I was beaming in that photo, so happy my boy had found love, so grateful to be included. The cruelest part was how thoroughly she'd fooled me. I defended her to Agnes when she'd made a snippy comment about Sandra seeming too perfect. I told my brother Tom that Sandra was the best thing to ever happen to Michael. I'd even written in my journal, my stupid, naive journal, about how blessed I was to gain such a wonderful granddaughter. The humiliation burned almost as much as the betrayal. How many people had seen what I'd been too blindly trusting to notice? How many wedding guests tomorrow would watch me, knowing I was the fool who'd paid for my own destruction? I ended up on my bedroom floor pulling out the box of cards Michael had given me over the years. Father's Day cards addressed to Grandma, because you've been both to me. Birthday cards thanking me for being his hero. A Mother's Day card from last year that said, "Biology doesn't matter. You're my real mom in every way that counts." That one broke me completely. I sobbed until I couldn't breathe, until my ribs ached and my eyes burned. The boy who'd written those words was about to let his wife destroy me. Whether he fully understood Sandra's plan or not, he'd chosen to believe her lies about my mental state. He'd chosen her manipulation over 17 years of my unwavering love. At 3 a.m, exhausted from crying, I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow was Michael's wedding day. In 18 hours, he would marry a woman who saw me as nothing but a bank account with a heartbeat, and I had no idea how to stop it. The morning sun streaming through my bedroom window woke me. For a moment in that hazy space between sleep and consciousness, I forgot everything. Then reality crashed back, and I almost pulled the covers over my head. Michael's wedding was in 10 hours. The smart thing would be to stay in bed, claim illness, let it happen. Let them win. But then I heard Harold's voice in my head, clear as day. Not a memory, but the kind of knowing that comes from 41 years of marriage. Maggie May, he used to call me when I needed strength. You didn't survive raising 3 boys in the Depression, working double shifts as a nurse, or losing your parents young to roll over now. Get up. I sat up slowly, my reflection in the mirror across from the bed catching my eye. The woman staring back looked defeated, old, fragile. Exactly what Sandra wanted everyone to see. But then I noticed something else in those eyes. A spark of something I'd inherited from my mother, who'd run a household of 7 kids alone after my father died. The same steel that had gotten me through Harold's death, through raising Michael, through every challenge life had thrown at me. I didn't survive 72 years to be destroyed by a con artist, I said aloud to my reflection. The words felt strange at first, then stronger. I didn't sacrifice everything for Michael to watch him be manipulated by criminals. I stood up, my knees creaking but my resolve hardening. Sandra had made one crucial mistake in her perfect plan. She'd underestimated me. She saw a grieving widow, a naive grandmother, an easy mark. She didn't see the woman who'd been head nurse in the emergency room for 30 years, making life and death decisions under pressure. She didn't see the woman who'd fought insurance companies for Harold's cancer treatment and won. She didn't see the woman who'd raised a broken 15-year-old boy into a successful man. I walked to Harold's study with new purpose. If Sandra wanted to play legal games, I'd give her a war. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed. James Morrison, Harold's best friend and our former attorney. He'd retired 5 years ago, but he'd told me to call if I ever needed anything. It was 7 a.m. on a Saturday. I called anyway. "Margaret? Is everything all right?" His voice was concerned but alert. "James, I need your help. Can you come over? It's urgent. It's about Michael's wedding and a trust fund I just discovered." "I'll be there in 30 minutes. While I waited, I began documenting everything. I wrote down every conversation I could remember with Sandra, every red flag I'd ignored, every piece of evidence I'd found. My handwriting was steady now, the trembling gone. I pulled out my laptop and started screenshotting the legal documents I'd found online about Sandra's family. I even found the settlement from Sandra's Arizona case. Public record, just buried deep. Then I remembered something. My phone automatically backed up recordings when I used voice memos for grocery lists. I scrolled through my phone and found it. A voice memo I'd accidentally started during lunch with Sandra last month. 20 minutes of her asking probing questions about my finances, my health, my memory. Her voice calculating and careful, not knowing she was being recorded. James arrived with coffee and a legal pad. As I laid out everything, his face grew increasingly grim. "Margaret, this is serious. We need to act fast, but we also need to be smart. They're expecting you to be at that wedding as the confused, helpless grandmother. What if we give them exactly what they want, but with a twist they'll never see coming?" I looked at this old friend, saw the strategic mind that had won hundreds of cases, and felt something I hadn't felt in days. Hope. "What do you have in mind?" I asked. "How good are you at acting, Margaret?" For the first time since discovering Sandra's betrayal, I smiled. "James, I raised 3 boys and survived 40 years of church committees. I'm excellent at acting." James and I worked like surgeons preparing for a complex operation. He spread legal documents across my dining room table while I gathered every piece of evidence I'd collected. "First thing," he said, adjusting his reading glasses, "we need to protect the trust immediately. I'm filing an emergency injunction that prevents any changes to the trustee status for 90 days, citing potential fraud. It'll be in the system by noon, but they won't know about it until Monday when they try to file their competency claim." "But what about the wedding?" I asked. "If Michael marries her, she still becomes family." James smiled, a sharp lawyer's smile I remembered from his courtroom days. "Only if the marriage is legally valid. Michigan law requires both parties to enter marriage without fraudulent intent. If we can prove Sandra entered this marriage specifically to commit financial fraud, the marriage can be annulled retroactively. While James made calls to judge friends who golfed with Harold, I had my own preparations to make. I called my neighbor's son, Tommy, who worked in IT security. "Tommy, I need you to check my computer and phone for any tracking software. I'll pay your consulting rate." Tommy found 3 programs Sandra had installed during her visits: keystroke loggers, location trackers, even something recording my calls. "Mrs. T, this is sophisticated stuff. Whoever did this knew what they were doing." He removed them all but kept the evidence on a flash drive. My next call was to Agnes at the courthouse. "I need every public record you can find on the Brennan family in Arizona, Nevada, and Michigan. Everything." By noon, we had a horrifying pattern. The Brennans had done this twice before, always targeting elderly widows with grandson beneficiaries. Both previous cases were settled quietly, the families too embarrassed to pursue criminal charges. But I wouldn't be embarrassed. I'd be furious publicly and spectacularly. James had another brilliant idea. "Margaret, that accidental recording from lunch. Michigan is a one-party consent state. That recording is legal evidence, but we need more. Can you get Sandra alone before the ceremony?" "She's supposed to come by to pick up the something borrowed. Family pearls she rejected before," I said. "She texted asking for them this morning, probably to maintain appearances." "Perfect. I have something for you." James pulled out a tiny recording device that looked like a button. "Pin this to your dress. Get her talking. Guilty people love to gloat when they think they've won." We drafted a new will, dated that morning, with very specific language. If anyone contested my mental fitness after Michael's wedding day, everything would go to charity. Not just my assets, but I'd trigger a clause in Harold's trust that would redirect those funds too. James had found the loophole. Harold had given me that power as trustee. The document was signed, witnessed by James and Tommy, and notarized by James's assistant who came to the house. But the masterstroke was James's discovery in Sandra's Arizona case files. "Margaret, look at this. The plaintiff's grandson in Arizona. His name was Mitchell. The one in Nevada, the grandson was Marcus. Both names starting with M, just like Michael." "She has a pattern," I breathed. "More than that, I found her college thesis online, psychology major. The title, Attachment Theory and Elderly Vulnerability: How Grandmothers Replace Deceased Spouses with Grandsons." She literally wrote a paper on how to exploit relationships exactly like yours with Michael. My phone buzzed. A text from Michael. "Grandma, Sandra's coming by in an hour to get the pearls. Please be nice. This day means everything to us. Everything to them. Everything Harold and I built. Everything I'd sacrificed. Everything I'd loved. It all meant nothing more to them than a score." "I'll be nice, Michael," I said aloud as I typed back a sweet response. "I'll be exactly what they expect." James squeezed my shoulder. "You sure you can do this?" I pinned the recording device to my dress, its tiny lens invisible against the fabric. "James, they want to see a confused old woman? I'll give them exactly that, right until the moment I destroy them." Sandra arrived at my door at 2 p.m., 3 hours before the ceremony, wearing a silk robe with bride embroidered in gold. Her smile was radiant, her performance flawless. "Mom, how are you feeling? We missed you last night." I let my hand tremble slightly as I reached for the door frame. "Oh dear, I'm so sorry about missing dinner. My stomach was just—" I trailed off, looking confused. "What time is the wedding again?" I saw it, the flash of satisfaction in her eyes. 5 o'clock, Mom. Remember? We wrote it down for you." She hadn't written anything down, but I nodded vaguely. "The pearls," I said suddenly, as if just remembering. "You wanted Mother's pearls. Come in, come in." As she followed me to the living room, I made sure to shuffle slightly, playing the part. The recording device James had given me felt warm against my chest. I sat down heavily, patting the couch beside me. Sit with me a moment, Sandra, before you become my granddaughter officially. She sat, impatience barely concealed. That's sweet, Mom, but I need to get back soon. I've been thinking, I said, letting my voice waver, about the trust, Harold's trust. Michael mentioned something about it, but I can't quite remember. Her eyes sharpened like a hawk spotting prey. Oh, don't worry about that. Michael and I will handle all the financial stuff after the wedding. You shouldn't stress yourself with such complicated matters. It's just $2 million is so much money. Harold never told me about it. Sandra leaned closer, her voice honeyed. That's exactly why you need us to manage it. You've been under so much stress, forgetting things. Like yesterday, when you forgot where the rehearsal dinner was. I did? Yes, Mom. And last week you told me the same story 3 times about Michael's first day of school. She patted my hand, and it took everything in me not to pull away. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Aging happens to everyone. After the wedding, we'll make sure you're taken care of. Taken care of, I repeated slowly. In a home? She didn't deny it. Somewhere safe where professionals can help with your condition. The house is too big for you anyway. We could sell it, use the money for your care. My house, where I'd raised Michael, where Harold's presence still lingered in every corner. That's very thoughtful, I whispered, then let my eyes go wide. Oh, the pearls. I stood up too quickly, swaying slightly. Sandra steadied me, and I saw her type something quickly into her phone with her free hand. Documenting my dizzy spell, no doubt. The wedding was held at Riverside Country Club, the venue I'd paid for. I arrived early, driven by James, who was posing as a concerned family friend. The space was beautiful. Cream roses and gold ribbons everywhere. 200 chairs facing an altar overlooking the lake. My money had bought perfection for my own execution. Patricia Brennan intercepted me immediately. Margaret, Dr. Whitman is so eager to meet you. She's sitting at your table. How nice, I murmured, noting the woman in her 50s holding a tablet already observing me. As guests arrived, I saw the trap they'd set. My seat was at a back table with the doctor, Patricia's elderly mother who had dementia, and 2 cousins who kept asking me if I knew where I was. Anyone watching would see me grouped with the impaired and supervised. Michael found me during photos, handsome in his tuxedo, Harold's cufflinks on his sleeves. I'd sent them with James. Grandma, you look beautiful. Your grandfather's cufflinks, I said softly. Yeah, Uncle James brought them. Said you wanted me to have them. He hugged me quickly, distracted. Sandra's family is wondering if you're feeling up to your speech. If not, her father has prepared something. They wanted to silence me. I'll be fine, sweetheart. The ceremony was torture, watching Sandra promise to love and cherish Michael while knowing she was calculating his worth. When the minister asked if anyone objected, I felt James's hand on my arm steadying me. Not yet. The reception began with toasts. Sandra's father spoke about family transitions and new guardianship. Her mother praised Sandra's compassion for the elderly. Each word was carefully chosen, painting a picture for the guests. Then the moment arrived. Sandra stood up, champagne glass in hand, that triumphant smile on her face. She looked directly at me as she began to speak. Sandra's voice rang out, clear and confident, cutting through the soft classical music and gentle conversation. Before we continue with the toasts, I need to address something important. She stood at the head table, her wedding dress catching the light like armor. Family is about more than blood. It's about capability, about future, about knowing when to pass the torch. She pointed directly at me, her manicured fingers steady and accusatory. She's not real family. The words echoed through the ballroom, bouncing off the crystal chandeliers. A grandmother is extended family at best, and when that grandmother is showing clear signs of decline, real family steps up to protect everyone's interests. The room went silent. 200 faces turned to stare at me. I sat frozen, my hands trembling in my lap. though this time from rage, not fear. Dr. Whitman leaned forward, tablet ready, documenting my reaction. Then Michael stood up. He walked slowly from the head table, his footsteps the only sound in the stunned silence. Every eye followed him as he approached me, his face unreadable. He leaned down, and his whisper was loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Now, Grandma, show them who you really are." I looked up at my grandson, seeing Harold's eyes looking back at me, full of love and fury. He helped me to my feet and handed me the microphone. "My dear Sandra," I began, my voice steady and clear, no trace of the confusion I'd been faking. "You're absolutely right. Family is about more than blood. It's about trust, loyalty, love, things you know nothing about." Gasps rippled through the room. Sandra's face went white. Michael took out his phone, connecting it to the venue's speaker system. "Everyone, you need to hear something." The recording from my lunch with Sandra filled the room, her voice calculating how to have me declared incompetent, discussing the trust fund, laughing about spending my money on the wedding that would destroy me. That's edited," Sandra stammered. "That's not real." "Oh, it's real," Michael said, his voice carrying the same authority Harold's had in a crisis. "Just like the recording from this afternoon is real." He played the new recording, Sandra's voice telling me about putting me in a home, selling my house, taking control of everything. Patricia Brennan shot to her feet. "This is ridiculous. The woman is clearly senile. She's being manipulated." "Manipulated?" James stood up from his table, briefcase in hand. "Your daughter has a psychology degree with a thesis on manipulating elderly grandmothers. She's done this before, in Arizona, in Nevada. We have the court records." I walked to the center of the dance floor, my voice growing stronger. "For 3 months, I welcomed you into my heart, Sandra. I called you daughter. I gave you my husband's mother's china, my own mother's jewelry, $50,000 of my savings. But that wasn't enough, was it? You wanted the $2 million in Harold's trust." "You can't prove anything," Robert Brennan shouted. "Actually," Michael said, pulling out a folder, "she can. You see, I've known about your scheme for 3 weeks. The moment Sandra first mentioned Grandma's confusion, I knew something was wrong. The woman who raised me, who never forgot a single baseball game or school play, suddenly developing dementia? Please." He turned to the guests, many recording on their phones now. "I hired a private investigator. Sandra Brennan isn't even her real name. It's Sandra Patterson. She was married before, to another man with a wealthy grandmother. That grandmother is now in a state facility while Sandra's ex-husband can't access his own inheritance." Sandra's carefully constructed composure finally cracked. "Michael, baby, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly. I've been pretending to go along with your plan while working with my grandmother to expose you. And here's the best part." He held up a document. "I never signed the marriage certificate. The minister is my grandmother's friend, not legally ordained. This entire wedding is a sham, just like you." The room erupted. Sandra lunged toward Michael, but security, hired by James that morning, intercepted her. Patricia was screaming about lawsuits while Robert tried to leave quietly. "Oh, and Sandra," I called out, my voice carrying the strength of every sacrifice I'd made, every night I'd cried, every moment I doubted myself. "That trust fund, the one you were so eager to steal, as of noon today, it's been transferred to a charitable foundation for elderly fraud victims. Every penny." Sandra's scream of rage was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. The next 20 minutes were chaos. Sandra's carefully styled hair came undone as security escorted her out, her designer heels clicking frantically against the marble floor as she screamed threats about lawsuits and defamation. Patricia Brennan tried to follow, but James intercepted her with a smile sharp as a blade. "The police are already at your hotel room with a warrant. We found evidence of your previous schemes in 3 states. Wire fraud across state lines is a federal crime." Robert Brennan didn't make it to the parking lot. 2 FBI agents James had contacted were waiting by his Mercedes, badges gleaming in the late afternoon sun. It turned out the Bureau had been building a case against the family for 2 years. Our evidence was the final piece they needed. The wedding guests remained frozen in their seats, phones out, recording everything. Within an hour, the videos would go viral. Fake bride exposed at own wedding would trend for weeks. But in that moment, I only had eyes for Michael. He walked back to me, and for the first time in weeks, I saw my grandson. Really saw him. Not the conflicted young man Sandra had been manipulating, but the boy I'd raised. He fell to his knees in front of my chair, tears streaming down his face. "Grandma, I'm so sorry. The things I said, the way I let her make me doubt you." His voice broke. "When she first mentioned your memory, I knew it was wrong. You've never forgotten anything important in your life. That's when I started recording her, following her, discovering who she really was." I pulled him up, holding his face in my weathered hands. "You had me terrified, sweetheart. I thought I'd lost you." "Never," he said fiercely. "When I found out about the trust, Grandpa's trust, I was shocked. But not about the money. I was shocked that she thought I'd ever choose money over you. You are my real family. You always have been." The reception hall was emptying now, guests departing with enough gossip to last a lifetime. But Michael's genuine friends remained. His college roommates started slow clapping, then others joined in, until the room filled with applause, not for a wedding, but for justice served. Dr. Whitman approached sheepishly. "Mrs. Thompson, I owe you an apology. I had no idea I was being used as part of a scam. Your mental faculties are obviously exceptional. The way you played that role, gathered evidence, orchestrated this revelation. It's brilliant." "I was a head nurse for 30 years, I told her. "I've seen real dementia. Acting confused when you're sharp is easy. Acting sharp when you're confused, that's impossible." 2 weeks later, I sat in my lawyer's office. Not James this time, but a prosecutor from the Elder Fraud Division. Sandra had been denied bail after they discovered she'd done this in 4 states, not 3. Her parents were facing decades in prison. The FBI found over $3 million in offshore accounts from their previous victims. "Mrs. Thompson," the prosecutor said, "your bravery in exposing them will help us return funds to 7 other families. You're a hero." I didn't feel like a hero. I felt tired, but also, surprisingly, renewed. Michael moved back in temporarily, not because I needed care, but because he needed to heal. We spent evenings on the porch, not talking about Sandra or the trust or the fake wedding, but about Harold, about memories, about the future. He was seeing a therapist to understand how he'd been manipulated, how someone could use love as a weapon. "I want to use Grandpa's trust differently," he told me one evening as we watched the sunset. "Not for me, but for a foundation. We could help other families targeted by people like Sandra." I looked at my grandson, older now, wiser, scarred but not broken, and saw Harold's goodness had survived in him. Your grandfather would love that. The local news ran our story with the headline, "Grandmother Outsmarts Con Artists at Fake Wedding." But they got it wrong. I didn't outsmart anyone. I just loved my grandson enough to fight for him, even when it looked like he was lost to me. 6 months later, the Thompson Family Foundation for Elder Protection was established. Michael ran it, I advised, and James provided legal counsel. Sandra's victims became our first beneficiaries. We returned what was stolen and provided legal support for prosecution. Sandra wrote me a letter from prison. I burned it unread in the same fireplace where I'd once cried over her betrayal. Some words don't deserve to be heard. Michael started dating a pediatric nurse named Emily, a kind woman who spent their 3rd date helping me in my garden, dirt under her manicured nails, laughing at my stories about Michael's childhood. When she called me Grandma Thompson, not Mom, I knew she was genuine. The roses Harold planted still bloom every spring, more beautiful for having survived the storm. A year has passed since the wedding that never was, and I'm standing in my garden this morning, tending to the same roses that witnessed my heartbreak and resurrection. The morning dew catches the light just like the fake diamonds in Sandra's tiara once did. But this sparkle is real, honest, fleeting, beautiful precisely because it asks for nothing in return. Michael and Emily are getting married next month. A small ceremony in this very garden, just family, real family, and close friends. 20 people who've proven their love through actions, not words. Emily asked if I was sure I wanted to host after what happened last time. I told her that you don't let thieves steal your ability to trust, just like you don't let winter stop you from planting spring flowers. The truth about family, I've learned, isn't found in blood tests or legal documents. Sandra was right about one thing. I wasn't real family by her definition. Her definition required contracts, inheritance rights, and power of attorney. But real family is measured in different currency altogether. It's counted in sleepless nights beside sickbeds, in sacrifices that go unmentioned, in showing up when showing up is hard. It's in the quiet acts of love that nobody documents because they're too busy living them. Harold's trust money, all $2 million, now helps dozens of families each year through our foundation. Last week, I met with Mrs. Chen, an 80-year-old widow whose nephew tried to steal her life savings by claiming she had dementia. We caught him before he succeeded. As she cried in my office, thanking me, I saw myself in her eyes. The woman I could have been if Michael hadn't stood by me, if love hadn't proven stronger than greed. People often ask me if I've forgiven Sandra. The truth is, I don't think about her enough anymore to need forgiveness. She was a storm that passed through my life, destructive but temporary. What remains after a storm? The structures that were built on solid foundations. My relationship with Michael wasn't destroyed. It was tested and proved unbreakable. My faith in my own judgment wasn't shattered. It was refined, sharpened, made wiser. But the most important lesson I learned wasn't about spotting con artists or protecting assets. It was this. When someone shows you their true character, believe them. But more importantly, when someone shows you their true character in a crisis, treasure them. Michael could have taken the easy path, believed the lies, chosen the money. Instead, he chose love. He chose the grandmother who chose him first, all those years ago when he needed a home. Greed is a peculiar poison. It doesn't just corrupt the greedy, it reveals them. Sandra didn't become evil when she discovered Harold's trust fund. She was always someone capable of elaborate cruelty. The money just gave her a reason to show it. In trying to destroy me to get to millions, she revealed the poverty of her own soul. What good is gaining $2 million if you lose your humanity in the process? The wedding that was supposed to mark my destruction became my liberation instead. Not from confusion, I was never confused. Not from age, I wear my 73 years with pride. But liberation from the polite silence that lets predators hunt the elderly. We're taught to be quiet, accommodating, trusting. Sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to be anyone's victim. This morning, as I deadhead the roses with the same hands that once shook with betrayal, I want to leave you with this thought. Family isn't about who has access to your bank account. It's about who has access to your heart and who treats that access as sacred. If you were in my situation, what would you have done? Would you have exposed Sandra publicly at the wedding or handled it privately? Would you have trusted Michael was still on your side or protected yourself alone? How long would you have waited before fighting back? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever discovered someone was using you? How did you handle betrayal from someone you trusted as family? And remember, sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's surviving, thriving, and using your scars to protect others from the same wounds. Like and subscribe if this story touched your heart, and share it with someone who needs to hear that they're stronger than they know. Because you are. We all are. Sometimes it just takes a Sandra to show us our own strength.